She was just a nanny, quiet, polite, invisible. 6 months later, she had the FBI kicking down the gates of a billionaire's estate. In every small town, there are stories people pretend not to know. The locked doors, the quiet staff, the names whispered in fear, and the ones you dare not cross. In Hollow Ridge, Virginia, everyone knew who really ran the town. It wasn't the mayor. It wasn't the sheriff. It was her, Vivian Crestfield, billionaire, philanthropist, political puppet master. She wore elegance like armor, but behind those pearls was a history soaked in silence and fear. For decades, no one questioned her. They didn't dare, until someone came along who didn't shout, didn't fight. She simply watched. Her name was Talia Monroe, a nanny, a shadow in the halls of the Crestfield estate. Smart, quiet, invisible. No one saw her coming. But in just 6 months, she would bring down the most powerful woman in the state. And she wouldn't use a weapon. She'd use the truth. This is the story of how she did it, of the bruises no one asked about, the threats no one heard, and the recordings that shattered everything. Inspired by true patterns, a fictional story of justice born in silence. She was just a nanny in a small town until she took down the most powerful woman in the state. Welcome to Family Crime Chronicles, your ultimate destination for chilling true crime stories. We uncover the darkest corners of real-life mysteries, twisted affairs. Make sure to watch this video to the very end, and if this story moves, you give the video a like. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will never miss an upload. Now, let's dive into the story. In the early light of dawn, mist curled like smoke along the narrow roads of Hollow Ridge, Virginia. The kind of mist that felt like memory. Soft, silent, a little haunted. Talia Monroe had seen it many mornings before, but today it felt heavier. The day she returned to the Crestfield estate. She sat quietly in the back of the estate's town car, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her profile bathed in the muted gray light. She wasn't one to fidget. Talia had long ago taught herself stillness. In a world like Hollow Ridge, where the powerful move like predators and the forgotten were swallowed in silence, stillness was a kind of armor. The car curved through the stone gates of the Crestfield property, a sweeping colonial manor tucked into the side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Ancient oaks flanked the drive, their branches arching like watchful arms overhead. Ivy crept up stone columns. Every inch of the house whispered wealth. Old wealth, the kind you didn't earn but inherited like a birthright or a curse. Talia stepped out into the chill and took a breath. This would be her 6th year living and working as the Crestfield's nanny, or, more precisely, as the last invisible thread holding together a family rotted from the inside. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. She passed by oil paintings in gold frames, ancestors staring down like judges. Her footsteps were soft on the marble. Upstairs, the children were still asleep. Downstairs, silence held court. Talia folded laundry in the sunroom, while rain tapped at the windows. She was humming softly, a habit from childhood, when the voice came, clipped and cool. You missed a sock. Vivian Crestfield stood in the doorway, immaculate, controlled, her voice like silk on a knife's edge. Sorry, ma'am, Talia said gently, retrieving the sock without breaking eye contact. Vivian gave a smile, practiced hollow, and disappeared down the hall. Her heels echoed on the tile like gunshots in a cathedral. Vivian Crestfield was Hollow Ridge's crown jewel. On paper, a real estate titan. In public, a philanthropist. Her husband, the late Senator Marcus Crestfield, had left behind a legacy drenched in legacy and power, and a funeral with more cameras and mourners. Vivian had filled the void with ruthless precision. The town depended on her donations. The local school bore her name. She cut ribbons, hosted galas, and bought silence like others bought groceries. She was untouchable, or so she believed. But Talia had learned something important during her years in this state. The most powerful people often forget who's listening. 3 years ago, Talia had paused just outside the kitchen door when she heard Vivian on the phone. I don't care if the permits were forged. Bulldoze the homes. They can sue if they can afford it. Another voice, male, hesitant. You know the mayor's worried. There's already talk. Vivian laughed. Cold, calculated. Then I'll buy the mayor another campaign. Or I'll buy the guy running against him. I don't lose. Talia stood still, silent in the shadows. Over time, she learned the rhythms of Vivian's empire. The strange, hushed arguments behind locked doors. Staff disappearing after errors. Conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. No one asked questions. They just left. Talia didn't. She stayed. She listened. In town, the Crestfield name was gospel. Her foundation funded the hospital, the parks, the historical society. She controlled the land, the loans, the elections. To most, Vivian Crestfield was a legend. To Talia, she was a ticking bomb. It was a Tuesday when the first crack appeared. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. The children were asleep. Talia was walking down the second-floor hallway toward her room when she heard footsteps. Vivian, drunk. Her mascara was smudged, her blouse unbuttoned just enough to suggest recklessness. She held a wine glass in one hand and a fury in the other. You think I don't know what you are? She hissed. Talia froze. You're a parasite, always listening, always watching. You think I don't notice? You think I don't hear the way the staff talks now? What are you telling them, little Nanny? She moved closer, fast. The slap came hard and sharp, ringing in the silence like a gunshot. Talia staggered back, but didn't cry out. She held her cheek, meeting Vivian's eyes with the same unflinching calm. Go ahead, Vivian whispered. Say something. Talia said nothing. That silence, controlled calm, enraged Vivian even more. Remember this, she spat. You don't belong here. And if you think for 1 second I can't erase you, you don't know who I am. She turned and vanished into her room, slamming the door. Talia stood alone in the hallway, hand to her bruised cheek. That night, she didn't cry. She planned. The rain pounded on the windows like warning drums. Talia sat at her small desk with the only thing she owned from her past, an old spiral notebook. She opened a new page and wrote, May 3rd incident, physical violence. Witness, none. She added, tone drunk, threats made. Then she reached under her mattress and retrieved a small device, a voice recorder, tucked into the hem of an old apron. From now on, she wouldn't just witness. She would document. Quietly, meticulously. It was no longer about surviving the job. It was about dismantling the queen. In Hollow Ridge, people didn't talk about the disappearances, or the investigations that went nowhere, or the staff who left in silence, bruised in ways no one could see. But Talia wasn't like them. She didn't want justice in the traditional sense. She wanted the truth to see the light. Talia going about her duties, changing sheets, preparing breakfast, helping the children with homework, always with a soft smile, always listening. Vivian on the phone, smiling at a gala, waving from a podium. 2 women under the same roof, predator and prey, except one was learning how to hunt back. The narration slows as the camera lingers on Talia's face, calm, calculating. She was just a nanny, just a quiet woman in the background. But power always underestimates what it cannot see. And Talia Monroe was far from invisible. The bruise on Talia's cheek faded in a week, but something else had taken root inside her. Not rage, that would have been too loud. Not fear, she'd learned to master that long ago. It was something colder, sharper, like steel forming in silence. She didn't flinch when Vivian passed her in the hall, didn't change her tone, didn't show a single crack. That calm exterior was the same veil she'd worn since childhood, back when she learned that silence wasn't just survival, it was strategy. And now it was war. Talia walked the children to the back garden, humming softly, her eyes scanning the estate's hidden corners. Ivy-covered walls, dense hedges, the broken intercom near the greenhouse. Things most people ignored. She wasn't ignoring anything anymore. She had begun a quiet investigation, not just Vivian, but the entire structure propping her up. It started with the staff. Subtle questions, a raised eyebrow, a moment of hesitation, averted eyes. Talia noticed there had been other nannies, other housekeepers. Mrs. Delgado, gone after 1 month. Tamika Lane never picked up her last paycheck. A groundskeeper named Eli, who vanished after accidentally damaging one of Vivian's antique cars. No formal firings. No police reports. Just silence. Talia marked them all in her notebook. Vivian had a private office on the 3rd floor. Off limits. Always locked. But during a dinner party, Talia noticed the door left ajar. The security panel flashed red. Someone had forgotten to reset it. She slipped inside. A wall of file cabinets. An old desk. A single laptop with an encrypted login. But it wasn't the digital records that caught her eye. It was a drawer of loose files. Thick manila envelopes labeled with names. Local judges. City planners. 2 county deputies. Inside, photocopies of checks. Photos of men shaking hands in parking garages. Signed donation agreements. Bribes. Vivian Crestfield didn't control Hollow Ridge because she was feared. She controlled it because she owned everyone who mattered. Talia didn't know Dennis Craig well. He worked in the county records office. Young, quiet, usually hunched over his keyboard, blending into the background even more than she did. But she had watched him during town events. The way he flinched when Vivian spoke. The way his hand trembled when passing her documents. He knew something. So one day, Talia approached his desk with a question about property permits. She kept her voice soft, her questions indirect. Dennis glanced up, wary, but he answered. By their 3rd conversation, he was whispering. She has dummy LLCs, buys land through shell companies. Sometimes it's land that belongs to church groups or old people who don't know what they're signing. Talia nodded, quietly horrified. And the records? Scrubbed. She has someone on the inside. You. Dennis paled. No, but I see what comes through, and what goes missing. Dennis Craig was no hero, but he was tired and scared. And more than anything, he wanted to be useful to someone who wasn't Vivian Crestfield. Talia met Ruby Jensen at a small diner off Highway 58, the kind of place where everyone pretended not to listen while listening hard. Ruby had been her best friend back in high school. Fierce, funny, a girl with a notebook and a dream of taking down giants. But Hollow Ridge broke her. Ruby had been blackballed from the local paper after investigating a suspicious land seizure involving Vivian. Now she worked freelance, mostly fluff pieces for regional blogs. Still, her eyes lit up when Talia slid a USB drive across the table. "You're serious?" Ruby whispered. "I have recordings, documents, video of her hitting me." "Jesus, Talia. She won't stop, and the law won't help." Ruby leaned in. "What are you planning?" "Not just exposure. Something she'll understand." Talia, now armed with a body cam and a tiny mic embedded in a locket, began gathering everything. Vivian screaming at a maid. A call with a city official demanding an illegal permit override. A conversation with a political donor about hiding campaign money through a charity front. She copied account numbers, took photos of wire transfers, noted dates, names, patterns. Each piece was small, but together they were dynamite. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every woman dismissed, every worker threatened, every voice drowned out by money and legacy. She couldn't go to the sheriff. Vivian's campaign funded his reelection. She couldn't go to the judge. Her name was on those bribe files. Even the newspaper editor was married to Vivian's cousin. There was no proper channel left. So she'd build her own. The three of them, Talia, Dennis, and Ruby, sat in a dim room, surrounded by printouts, audio files, and a giant corkboard mapping out Vivian's empire. "This isn't enough," Ruby said. "It is," Talia replied, "but not to destroy her, just to corner her." Dennis looked up. "What are you saying?" "She spent years blackmailing others. It's time we reverse it. The plan was this: get Vivian alone, present everything, give her one chance to walk away from the throne she built on fear, not to spare her, but to expose her through her own panic." Talia sat alone in her room the night before the confrontation. She wrote, "Tomorrow I become someone else. Someone who doesn't wait for justice. Someone who makes it happen. I'm not afraid anymore." The rain returned outside, a familiar rhythm tapping at her window. This time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a drum roll. The more power someone has, the more fragile they are. Vivian Crestfield didn't fear exposure. She feared irrelevance. That was what made her vulnerable. And Talia Monroe was about to take everything she had built, brick by brick, and turn it into a weapon. The walls were covered in notes. A printed map of Hollow Ridge. Dozens of names in red string connecting departments, accounts, and dates. Talia stood in front of it, arms crossed. Dennis sat on the couch, visibly anxious. Ruby poured coffee and watched them both. "This is more than one story," Dennis said. "It's a whole network. Money laundering, voter manipulation, forced evictions. We're not going to the press with it." "Not yet," Talia replied. Ruby raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "This would explode. Because the second we go public, she shuts it all down, buries the paper trail, cuts deals behind closed doors. We don't need headlines. We need surrender." Talia didn't just want to wound Vivian. She wanted to corner her in broad daylight, force her to betray her own legacy before the world. And to do that, she needed control. She would give Vivian one meeting, one carefully constructed confrontation, on her turf, under her rules, backed by irrefutable proof. But first, she needed leverage strong enough to make the queen. Dennis snuck her in through the back. They wore gloves, masks, avoided cameras. He guided her to a locked cabinet marked inactive cases. Inside, boxes of land deeds, property transfers, and tax records no longer digitized, forgotten, buried. But Dennis knew where to look. Together, They pulled files linked to three of Vivian's biggest acquisitions, properties bought under shady LLCs, with forged signatures and conveniently timed deaths of previous owners. Talia photographed everything, every page, every signature. Then they found the file that made Dennis gasp, a case involving a house burned down 5 years ago, traced back to a shell company that Vivian had quietly dissolved after receiving $1 million insurance payout. Arson? Talia asked. Dennis nodded slowly. Unsolved. Talia spent the next week walking the estate as if nothing had changed. She smiled at guests, poured wine, played piano with the children. But every corner she turned, she was collecting data. Vivian's phone calls, a maid sobbing quietly behind the pantry door, a groundskeeper admitting he was paid to keep watch, not ask questions. Talia's hidden camera caught it all. They now had, for hours of hidden recordings, documented proof of illegal land seizures and false LLCs, names of bribed officials, and signed bank statements. Testimony from 3 current staff members under NDA. Talia sat at Ruby's desk, assembling it all into a single digital file, copied onto 3 encrypted flash drives. One for her, one for Ruby, one for off-site backup. She even drafted a press release, not to send now, but to trigger if something happened to her. It was insurance. Talia understood the risk. Vivian Crestfield was not the kind of woman who gave up power easily. She wouldn't cry or beg. She'd calculate, delay, plot. So the meeting had to be more than a threat. It had to feel like the end. Talia requested a private audience. She worded the message carefully. I need to speak to you privately regarding my resignation and something I discovered that may impact your position. No emotion, no warning, just enough intrigue to make Vivian curious. The response came in minutes. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Garden Terrace. Alone. If this goes wrong, I won't walk away. I know that. But if it works, it means every woman who came before me gets to be heard, and everyone who comes after won't have to be afraid. She packed her flash drive into a necklace locket. Not flashy, just something simple, easy to hide. And then she slept, not peacefully, but with purpose. Ruby pacing her kitchen, phone in hand, ready to call the press. Dennis waiting outside the clerk's office with the emergency folder, looking like he might throw up. Talia walking through the estate's back garden, wearing a long beige coat and the same black flats she'd worn on her first day there. Vivian was already seated at the table, a porcelain teacup in hand. Sunglasses on. Talia, she said smoothly, is this about severance or something more theatrical? Talia sat, opened a small case, slid over a pair of earbuds and a digital player. Listen, she said. Vivian stared for a moment, then placed the earbuds in and pressed play. It was a recording of her drunken outburst, the threats, the slap, the bruising aftermath. Then came the bribery call, the forged signatures, the laughing conversation about those poor idiots I bought the land from. Vivian's expression didn't change, but her hands trembled. For the first time since Talia had met her, Vivian Crestfield looked unsure, human, cornered. Talia laid out 3 demands. 1. Resign from all public board positions within 48 hours. 2. Transfer $2.5 million into a fund to support displaced residents of her land deals. 3. Make a public statement claiming early retirement for health reasons. Vivian smirked. You think this is checkmate? No, Talia replied. I think it's mercy. If I don't comply... Talia leaned forward. then everything you built becomes a headline, and not the kind your foundation pays for. Vivian didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She nodded once, and that terrified Talia more than if she'd screamed, because that meant Vivian was already planning her next move. Talia returned with a strange calm. She agreed, she said, too easily. Ruby frowned. She's going to retaliate. I know. Dennis handed her the backup drive. You still want to hold it? Yes. And be ready to run if something happens to me. Talia sat at the edge of her bed that night, watching the trees sway outside the estate window. She had exposed the queen. But the game wasn't over, and the next move would be deadly. For 6 years, Talia Monroe had been invisible, a background figure, a quiet presence. But that was over now. She wasn't hiding anymore. And Vivian Crestfield was coming undone, not all at once, but like a crack in stained glass, starting quietly at the edges and then shattering. 2 days after their meeting, an announcement went live on the Hollow Ridge Foundation's website. Due to ongoing health concerns, Mrs. Vivian Crestfield will step down from all active board roles effective immediately. It made headlines, not national ones, not yet, but it was enough to set the town whispering. No interview, no speech, just silence, and that silence made her absence feel louder than ever before. Talia watched the statement on her laptop. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She knew Vivian, knew her silence was just the sound of weapons being sharpened. And she was right. At first, it was subtle. Talia's bank account was flagged for suspicious activity. Her health insurance was suddenly canceled. The coffee shop she frequented stopped serving her. Then it escalated. 2 men in dark suits appeared at the estate, asking questions. They claimed to be with the Virginia State Real Estate Commission, but their badges looked off. Vivian didn't speak to them. She didn't need to. Talia recognized the message. They weren't investigators. They were scouts. Dennis called just after midnight. Talia, she's not going to let this go. I overheard something in the clerk's office. What was it? Her lawyer's trying to transfer property titles again, under new dummy LLCs. She's repositioning assets in case the feds move in. She's prepping for flight. She's prepping for war. Ruby had a place out in the Blue Ridge foothills, tucked between pine trees, off a gravel road no GPS could find. It was where they planned to go if things turned. That night, Talia packed a single duffel bag. She didn't take souvenirs. She didn't leave a note. She just walked out the back of the Crestfield estate and disappeared into the night. At Ruby's cabin, the Wi-Fi was weak, but steady enough. Talia connected 3 hard drives. She began uploading the complete archive, audio recordings, hidden camera footage, legal documents, signed statements, archived emails from Vivian's server, recovered by Dennis. The files went to 1. A secure journalist contact Ruby had known from her newspaper days. 2. A National Investigative Bureau with an open interest in campaign finance fraud. 3. A dead-drop server in Europe that couldn't be traced back to her. As the files uploaded, the screen blinked a simple message. 1.8 gigabytes remaining. Vivian paced her bedroom. Lights off. Phone pressed her ear. She's gone, one of her men said. No trace. Then find her, Vivian hissed, and make sure she can't press that button. Vivian wasn't planning a press conference. She wasn't filing lawsuits. She was sending enforcers. And Hollow Ridge? It was too small, too complicit to intervene. No one would ask questions if a nanny disappeared in the woods. It started with a click. Ruby heard it. Outside, near the back window, she went still. Then came the footsteps. Talia grabbed the flash drive from the laptop and slipped it into her coat. "Back door," Ruby whispered. "Now." They fled into the forest, barefoot, barely breathing. Two dark figures stepped into the cabin seconds later. Too late. But not empty-handed. They took the laptop, the backup drives, all except the one Talia carried. They ran for nearly an hour, through branches, over cold creeks, past deer trails and mossy logs, until they found the logging road Ruby had remembered from her childhood. At dawn, a single mail truck passed by and stopped. "Please," Ruby said, "we need to call the FBI." Talia sat across from two federal agents. They didn't laugh. They didn't doubt her, because as it turned out, they'd been watching Vivian for months. Her foundation had triggered multiple red flags in a recent campaign finance audit, but they lacked internal evidence. Until now, Talia handed them the flash drive. "Everything is on here," she said. "And if it's not, check the link I emailed to your tip line this morning." They didn't ask how she knew to do that. They just thanked her and got to work. The next morning, Vivian boarded a private jet from a rural airfield 20 miles outside Hollow Ridge. She wore sunglasses, a white coat, and carried nothing but a leather briefcase. As she approached the stairs, two unmarked SUVs rolled onto the tarmac. Federal agents stepped out. "Vivian Crestfield," one said. "We have a warrant." Vivian paused at the base of the stairs. Her hands trembled, but she didn't resist. She knew it was over. In less than 72 hours, Hollow Ridge went from hushed and untouchable to a headline on every major network. Real estate tycoon indicted in massive corruption scandal. Nanny turned whistleblower exposes web of abuse. The footage played on loop. Vivian being led away in handcuffs. Her signature state behind her, suddenly much smaller. Ruby launched a 6-part series. It opened with her voice. She wasn't a politician. She wasn't a prosecutor. She was a nanny in the mountains. But Talia Monroe saw the truth, and she didn't flinch. It went viral within days. People across the country heard Vivian's voice on the tapes, heard the fear in staff members' testimonies, saw the rot beneath the luxury. 6 weeks later, Talia moved into a modest apartment in Asheville. She worked with a nonprofit now, helping other domestic workers understand their rights, document abuse, and fight back without violence. She didn't want fame. She wanted freedom, and she'd earned it. Dennis receives a promotion, becomes state records auditor. Ruby's podcast is acquired by a national network. Vivian is indicted on 42 counts, including witness intimidation, fraud, and labor abuse. But Talia? She disappears from the spotlight because she was never in it for the attention. She was in it for the truth, and the truth had finally spoken. Some people fall quietly. Others burn on the way down. Vivian Crestfield had always known how to keep the flames away from her name, until now. Because everything she built, every lie, every threat, every silent room she controlled, had finally met the one thing she couldn't crush. A quiet woman with nothing to lose. The headlines hit hard and fast. State donor and real estate magnate arrested in widening corruption probe. Whistleblower Nanny hands over devastating evidence. Crestfield's charitable empire under federal investigation. Cable news anchors called it a house of cards. Journalists dug into Vivian's past. The old lawsuits, the conveniently disappeared housekeepers, the land deal kickbacks. And suddenly, the silence that once surrounded Hollow Ridge was shattered. The town reacted like a stunned animal. Shops pulled Vivian's photo from their walls. The local paper, once run by her childhood friend, finally published the truth. Her name came down from the hospital wing she donated. People who had once praised her crossed the street when her name was mentioned. They had known. They just hadn't wanted to see. Talia didn't speak to reporters. She didn't do interviews. She declined every network's offer for an exclusive. Instead, she poured her time into her new role in Asheville, helping others like her. Live-in workers with no voice, no legal protection, and no one believing their stories. She was training them now. How to document abuse safely, where to send evidence, how to build alliances with journalists and legal advocates. She didn't call it revenge. She called it defense. While federal prosecutors built their case, Vivian tried everything. Her legal team argued the evidence was illegally obtained. They claimed Talia had motivations of personal vengeance. They even tried to smear Ruby's name again, using a fabricated email chain suggesting bribery. But it didn't stick, because this time Ruby had receipts, and Talia had witnesses, housekeepers, ex-staff, even a former driver who'd been paid to keep quiet about a woman who vanished in 2013. The storm Vivian had sent after others had finally turned on her. The full list of charges read like a corporate horror novel: labor exploitation and abuse, fraudulent real estate transfers, wire fraud and racketeering, witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice, unlawful political contributions through shell organizations. 42 counts, each carrying its own sentence, each etched into public record. The final episode of Ruby's podcast dropped 6 months to the day after Talia walked out of Crestfield Estate. In it, she told a single story of the first day Talia arrived, the humming, the folded laundry, the silence so deep it made the air heavy, and then the moment that silence cracked. Ruby's voice, calm and powerful, said she was just a nanny in a forgotten town. But when the world refused to listen, she recorded it. When no one believed her, she documented it. And when they tried to erase her, she became impossible to ignore. It went viral. Again, Dennis Craig stayed quiet through the storm. He didn't want to be known, but the state took notice. His diligence, his quiet cooperation, his willingness to protect evidence under pressure, all of it led to one thing. He was promoted to state records auditor. Not a flashy title, but powerful. And this time, he would be the one watching the paper trails, not the other way around. Without Vivian Crestfield, Hollow Ridge had to reckon with itself. New leadership, outside audits. 2 council members resigned under pressure after it was revealed they'd received illegal campaign donations. The local shelter, once silenced by Vivian's control over the budget, reopened. Talia's nonprofit helped restore back pay to 3 other domestic workers who had been dismissed unlawfully. Justice didn't arrive all at once. It came in echoes, and those echoes rippled outward, far beyond one mountain town. In the courtroom, Vivian didn't look like the queen of Hollow Ridge anymore. She wore beige, no diamonds, no lipstick, just a vacant, tired eyes of someone who no longer controlled the narrative. Talia didn't attend the trial. She didn't need to. She had already done her part. Vivian never confessed, never apologized. Her attorneys negotiated plea deals on some charges, but others would go to trial. She was denied bail after attempting to wire $3 million to a Swiss account. And though she had once stood atop gala stages and smiled for cameras, she now spent her days waiting in holding cells, watched by guards. The woman who had bought silence for 30 years had no one left to speak for her. Talia sat on a porch swing outside her apartment. The air smelled like honeysuckle and rain. She was reading a letter, one from a young woman in Arizona who had listened to Ruby's podcast and had left her abusive employer the same week. "I thought I had no options," the letter read. "But then I heard about you, and now I know I do." Talia folded the letter gently. She looked out at the trees. She didn't say anything, but she smiled. She didn't use force. She didn't scream. She just listened, waited, collected the truth, and when the moment came, she let the truth burn through everything. This was never just a story about power. It was a story about what happens when power thinks it's untouchable, and about one woman